Yeah, Julian Stott. He talks a lot about social organizations, and he has a couple of books out there, and a lot of times you can get them for free as like a free PDF download, but one that I really like is Social Leadership. And it's really talking about organizations going forward are going to be more social organizations. And by social organizations, we don't mean, hey, everybody's having a happy hour. It really means how we work and how we get work done is not just top down, but it's across the organization. And the better your skills are for making those connections, making them across lines of business, across departments, across businesses, the better off you're going to be, the better you'll be able to influence others, the better you'll be able to bring ideas back. And it all goes back to being able to connect with people in a variety of ways, in a variety of locations. So that goes back to asynchronous as well as synchronous.
Yeah.
Connection is hugely important for the future. It really is.
Yeah, I agree with that, obviously. So the aspect of, like I said, the original design is that they work in self-managed teams. They have 3 chapters that they had to, but it was still very much about that content and presenting that content using experiential activities, using, finding pieces and artifacts, curating across the internet, samples of things so people could see how this would work in, and encourage to bring in their own experiences that they've had in work and things like that. And yet, you'd still see this rush to get the content of that chapter crammed into the time frame that their presentation was. And it was hard for me to kind of try and say, well, what don't they need and what do they need? And I feel like, because I chose because now I had the choice, and I still, this is the textbook, and I hold it up day one and say, who wants to read all of this? I don't want to read all this, but that doesn't mean, so the model was always, we're going to divide and conquer this thing. And you're going to get to go deep into one function of management and be like the group that represents and really tries to understand the leadership dimension or the planning dimension or the organizing dimension or controlling. And then we're going to teach each other. And it will never be the same. You always make this thing, whatever it's, you make it what it's going to be, and it's a unique experience. And next semester, it's a whole new unique experience. And, but the basic structure has been the same for the 3 semesters that I've taught it before. And now, this concept is more like, yes, you'd still have that team, but you wouldn't be trying to, I think I'd use our synchronous time for that more social type meetings to actually then deliver something in the discourse space that is subject to criticism more this semester. And still that more like, oh, we're trying to make something out of nothing kind of thing, using stuff like that article or that PDF that you just, instead of this, because that's a whole nother thing. And then there is an open source textbook that some other professors have started to use this semester. And I just, when they asked me way back in May, what textbook I wanted this semester, I was like, I don't know if I'm up for trying to spend my whole summer evaluating and rebuilding for a new textbook. Which I'm glad I didn't do that but I'm also, feel a little guilty that I feel like I really don't want any of these. I think there's some students who are going to want this.
There are. And they can refer back to it. And the concepts of management really haven't changed.
No.
And when you look at how do I manage people in a face-to-face world versus how do I manage people in a virtual world, it's just nuanced. Giving feedback is the same. How you hire is the same. It's just nuanced a little differently. But going back to what you were sharing about, bringing perspectives, and so they, dive deep into a topic, they curate some information. I mean, curation is another one that's going to be important. The world, I mean, I forget the statistics, but there's so much information that just gets generated on the internet, and it's going to be more and more and more, and it can become overwhelming. So how do we, in our roles, as well as how do we as managers, as HR professionals, as whoever we are, curate information and filter that out? So this can be a great way to learn that, but it also provides them a way to scaffold knowledge. And Julian Stott is one of the people who talks a lot about scaffolding knowledge. So they're taking, here's the basic concept of planning, of leadership. Here are my unique experiences. And then when they come to present, or they share it on discourse and in the live session, the social session, where, let me ask some questions about that. Let me share my perspective, and let's kind of have that discussion. Then the knowledge gets scaffolded even more. And that's where the true learning happens, because what will happen is they'll remember those specific stories versus remembering the pieces of the textbook. And they'll pull out the pieces that are relevant to them. And that's an important skill to take in the world of work.
Yeah.
So, when you have to share, when you have to present to senior leadership, you can start to help them scaffold their own knowledge just by sharing stories. It's the same principles, just a different spin. So it's important. To me, it's really important work, not just for the class, but it's also important work for the world of work, because we are socially dynamic. And it is, as some people, Julian is one of them, who calls it the social age. We are social creatures when it gets right down to it. And this pandemic is pushing all of our buttons. So whatever environment you can create to allow for that human connection is fantastic. It really is. And that's where you can really allow for that discussion that I have questions about, or share with me your thinking on. And that really can be a powerful opportunity for them to learn.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. I guess I'd like you, if you don't mind, digging deeper into how you see that what I'm proposing in the classroom would actually better prepare them for that kind of senior leadership. Can you give an example, like a story that says, here's where it's basically, I had to dig through what is almost a textbook and try and package this, because I do know that when you're talking as more of a specialist to people who aren't, the more generalist, higher levels of and senior management, you need to be able to connect it to them and then provide, like you're saying, a gateway. But I guess, I don't know if there's an example, even from this more recent conversations in pandemic times. Yeah.
I can share one that's real recent, which is the conversation about how do we prepare our organization for this new world of work. So we went virtual, 95% of our population. So we're 19,000-ish employees. About 95% of our population went to work from home. Prior to that, only 17 to 22% were working from home on a 100% basis. So of course we had to prepare. We all thought it was going to be, it's going to be 3 months. In August, we'll revisit. Well, just June started and we realized this isn't going to happen. So our CEO made the decision that we are going to work at home 100% for the rest of this year. However, plans were still being made for reentry and coming back to the workplace. So there was never a thought of, we really need to think about how this pandemic is going to impact us in the world of work. There were thoughts about it and there were conversations about it, but there weren't as many, not sure what the word is, there wasn't a big push for it, so to speak. We were all still thinking we're going to return to the workplace, everything's going to go back to normal. So a couple of us got together and really sat down and thought about, we don't know what the world's going to look like in 2021. We don't know when there's going to be a vaccine. We also know people have been successfully working from home, and now they may want more opportunities to work from home. We also don't know what school is going to look like, childcare is going to look like. What are the needs of our employees? Their needs may be forever changed. And because of that, we may have a need for a more flexible hybrid workplace. You're talking about an organization that is spread all across the United States in hubs, large buildings, huge real estate footprint. And we have never had more than 17 to 22% who are 100% virtual. And we can see there's going to be much more of a call for it. And because you have organizations that are actually going all virtual until at least June of next year, 2021, and then after, if we suddenly turn around and become a location-dependent organization again, we may be out of talent. So we saw the need, but the question is, how do we convince our senior leadership that this is something we have to start chasing sooner rather than later? So we have, there's tons of articles out there. If you type in remote work, you're going to come up with thousands of hits. The question was, how do we approach this in a way that's going to help senior leadership see the need for the urgency? That was the word I was looking for earlier. The need for the urgency versus let's wait and see. So what we did is we went back to basics. And what are the important things about business? Well, the important things are about our customers, because we really do truly care about our customers. For us as an insurance company, it is about our distribution channel, so our agents, and it's also about our employees. But we can't forget about the bottom line. So we started crunching the numbers, and we started looking at what does it look like if we're not leasing as much space? So if we don't have this, what's that economic impact? What's the impact on, and what's the carbon footprint impact? So if we have a big presence in major cities, Phoenix, Arizona, Los Angeles, California, where congestion is huge. So we started crunching numbers in terms of carbon footprint. If we have less employees, even if they don't all work at home 100% of the time, what does it look like if they commute less? And what is that, and how does that help the environment, as well as how does that help our employees? So those were two big numbers we looked at. And then we also took a look at how are our agents going to do business, and how are our customers going to want to do business in this new, not so new normal. Mm-hmm. You may not have people, when you have an agent who's used to doing business face-to-face, they're now going to have to shift to probably doing more, obviously more digital right now, but in the future, customers, we are starting to see that there hasn't been much of a drop in things like Peapod and other online delivery services. People are like, oh, this is convenient. The same may be true in the way we sell. So we started looking at what are the skills that they're going to need, our agents, to support our customers. And if we can experiment with our employees and build their skills now, because we know we're going to need them through December, we can forecast we're probably going to need them through March of next year. Here's what it will do for our employees, things like Net Promoter Score, engagement. And if you think about it, we are a cross-hub company. So all of these skills they're learning now can also go and they can apply them to their regular life. And then this can then trickle down. We can try things out and, kind of pull some levers, and then we can translate that to our agent force. So what we did is we pulled out a couple of key articles that were written by your consulting companies like McKinsey and Gallup. And we looked at some of the surveys that they had done. And then we went back to the numbers that we crunched. We are estimating this, and this. We are estimating this impact to our customers. Our customers are looking about how they're going to change business or how they want to do business going forward. And then we curated an article to go with it. And then we decided to write a brief, and we highlighted those key areas and made it really short, one page. And it was really, what's the future going to look like? And here is why we need to start working on these skills and capabilities and infrastructure now. and how it'll set us up for the future, regardless of what that future looks like. So it was really about, how do we curate the best of the best? How do we identify what are those things that senior leaders really engaged with and really has concerns about? Customers, employees, real estate, and the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And really just curate it to that, and then curated the ideas. And we reached out to all of our networks, internal and external. So I am fortunate enough to have a really great external network that I could reach out to that has been doing this or consulting on working remotely for a while. So we were able to pull insights from them. So by having these skills of curation, we could put our fingers on the right information, or we could reach out to our networks, because we had also built those up. It wasn't just me, it was a collection of people.
Mm-hmm.
And we could reach out to them and say, hey, have you got anything about, or have you seen anything like? And we were able to put our information, or put our hands on all of this information and distill it down in a way that was going to speak to our senior leaders. So that's where I see, kind of the parallels between what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
as well as, what we're doing in the world of work.
So just to clarify, how big was that team working on trying to get that brief together?
We were probably 5 strong.
Okay.
Yep.
5 strong, and then a couple extra that were.
Yep. We reached out when
Mhm.
we needed to. So if we needed numbers on, we have corporate responsibility team. So we reached out to them for, what is our current printing numbers? Because printing went down to 0. So
Yeah.
we wanted to look at, they are also starting to measure carbon footprint.
Yeah.
So we reached out to them for data. But the team itself, there was probably 3 of us that actually wrote the brief, but then we sent it out to level down from our senior leaders and said,
Yes.
does this resonate with you? So we sent it out to like our head of customer experience, and she put a couple of great things in there. She goes, now customers, their days are 24/7. So we may have to think about how do we address, so we pulled that into the brief. So
Mm-hmm.
Small core team, but we reached out to both internal and external networks.
And how did that team get formed? Is that like the people you actually work with on a regular basis, or somebody reached out and said, hey, we need to convince these people, and you kind of self-organized?
It was a need seen by one of our senior leaders. And a couple of us had been, sharing things back and forth. Here's some articles. Here's some things we really we probably need to be thinking about. And she identified it and said, hey, why don't the 3 of you? And then we brought in two other people. And it's cross-functional. These are people I may have worked with in the past, but not work with on a regular basis.
Okay. All right. So that is definitely also the kinds of things we talk about too, is that you got to be so, and because if I heard you also say, the people that got asked to do that were people who may have already been seen as this is your topic, but also people who may have been sharing early on.
Exactly.
Curating their own resources and sharing it across the generously, just for the sake of like, let's start thinking about this, not because somebody said do that. They just, if it impacted you, or if you were caring enough to actually think about it, to find your own resources, to kind of help your own thinking, and then sharing it with others in your organization, sort of set you out to be like, hey, can you guys work on this?
Yeah, and that's what happened to me is this has always been a passion project of mine. So I've been tirelessly working as a side hustle in my day job to really help support those who are virtual, because it is a pain point when you have such a location-centric organization and you have people who work from home. They're often misunderstood. They're often forgotten about. And before we had an enterprise social network, we now have Workplace by Facebook, but Yammer, those are all examples of enterprise social networks. We really didn't have a way to engage, and we got that, and it was really just a passion project of mine. But what I also did is shared articles on our communities of practice, held conversations and discussions and book clubs, and all of that content that I've been sharing for the past 1.5 years, 2 years. When we went to work remotely, I got a call from our comms group, and they're like, hey, yes,
Yeah.
from our communications group. And hey, we need to build a website to help people start to make this transition. We needed to build it in 3 days. And all we did is curated all of the content I had already shared because it was already out there. And we just repackaged it. We kind of maybe added this or that. And that was how we built it. And because we had that and we had already shared and I had already shared, it was all ready to go.
Yeah.
So that sharing does a couple of things. It one helps to build knowledge and build skills of people, but it also builds your social capital.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because I was trying to get my name out there or anything like that. It was, here's what I know, and let me share it with you and be open about sharing it and invite others to share. And that led to this opportunity, which is now a stretch assignment for me. So for the next however many months until the end of 2020, I'm focused on this project, which is as we think about flexible work, what does it look like in the future for us?
Yeah. So, and that's where when we talked about how like the textbook will call this job crafting, that you basically, you're not required to do these things, but because it makes the job more engaging for you to bring your own unique interest into it. And then you just keep doing this thing that nobody really asked you to do. And yet you're preparing yourself, whether, for an opportunity like this time, or to you are still developing those skills that you can take elsewhere if you really want to do that job. And for a future, or make your own consulting and those kinds of things, which, so,
big fan of job crafting. It's
yes.
And it really is, it's a way for you to show the organization. I mean, this was something that was important. I was beating this drum for a long time. And all of a sudden, global pandemic enters and we were prepared. So it's one of those things that you can do to prepare for whatever that future holds. But these are all things that are transferable. So I learned everything from how to work on an enterprise social network, how to build a community, how to hold virtual book chats. All of these things are things that you can take elsewhere, whether it's new job in your company or new job externally. And so the whole concept of job crafting really is just fantastic. It's a great opportunity, and my manager and I had lots of discussions on it, and she was fully behind me. So it was just a side hustle, and it now is a full-time gig for a while.
Awesome. Yeah. So Workplace by Facebook is a social network. Looks like Facebook, but it's just for inside your company. And
it is. It's an enterprise version of Facebook. It's basically take groups, and that's really what it is. It is groups, so communities of practice. There's also feeds, but it's mainly the group feature, which is really nice. But we can now do things like live stream video, which is a great opportunity. It's just a way to connect people across the organization.
Yeah, because I know that there's like Microsoft Teams is another thing, and I don't know if that's something your organization uses. And it was
we don't.
an offer,
we use WebEx Teams. Yeah, so we use and Microsoft Teams. I like better because it has more flexibility with all the Microsoft products, but they also have Yammer, which is their version of an enterprise social network. So Yammer gives you the ability to form groups. So you can have your conversations in your work teams and Microsoft Teams, but then in Yammer, that's when you can share with the world, and the world would be your organization. So that's how we use it. We use WebEx Teams for work stuff, very similar to Microsoft Teams, and then we use Workplace by Facebook for the enterprise initiatives. So the things I want to share with the entire organization, that's where they happen.
Okay. And if you can try and make any correlations between those types of things, and because I do have, I mean, I don't know what it's like for you, but Microsoft Teams slows my computer down very much. And my husband all of a sudden put it on his phone, and he's like, I need a new phone because my phone battery's dying. I'm like, no, I've heard Teams does drain. So, I mean, there's that kind of, when you think about, especially from my perspective, like college students, things that would be demanding on their technology. So, I'm not used to that. So I guess like if you tried to think about, because you've had experience in those and you've had experience in discourse, Is there any like, because I mean, obviously Discourse has the tagging feature for groups. It's
Right.
it is a whole open conversation, and then there's you can have these co-working spaces that are
Right.
you
Right.
know,
Yep.
private conversation. It doesn't allow for like the resource sharing of actual files. It allows like links really well, and then you can put a link to Google
Mm-hmm.
Drives and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess you have to do like video conferencing through things like Zoom, and that's why
Right.
the college offers Blackboard Collaborate Connect, which is
Yeah, I've seen that.
basically like a video. They just
Yeah.
put it in, but for me, it's most of the other classes are going to take place that way, and because I want my students to take control
Mm-hmm.
like of doing organizing the meeting and this and bringing in external speakers, I just wasn't sure that trying to use the Blackboard feature
Right.
made sense when I
Yep.
already have been used to using Zoom.
Well, and that's the thing is what I always tell people to do is really think about who's the consumer. And, and organizations have to do this, teams have to do this. So we tell teams to have conversations in their own, within our organization about what works for them. Will it work better for you if you engage on Workplace by Facebook? If that's where your team is, they're heavy, that's where they're, by all means, you don't have to use WebEx Teams, but here's the benefits and the drawbacks of both, and have a conversation though about it. Same is true for your work, which is if Microsoft Teams is a drain. I haven't noticed it, but I have different computer. And again,
you
who
have your
knows?
company's computers, probably.
Exactly. I have my company's
I have
computers.
my own little computer, and it's
Yep.
not the best of the best, and
and that's it. So the consumer may not have the technology they need. So what's the best technology for this particular situation? And that's really the conversation that you need to have. If it is more about how do we help them build something, and again, thinking about what is it that you really need to do? Well, you need to have open conversations, but you also need to have some closed conversations, which Discourse can do for you. You need to share files. Well, people aren't sharing files back and forth anyways. I'm a bigger fan of using something like Dropbox or Google Drive or, whatever. And then I can just send them there. That way I can still keep it without having to pass a file back and forth, which is out of date.
Yes.
let me just be frank. That's out of date. Let's put it up. That way, if I have a change to it, I can just make the change and it updates the document.
Yeah.
So it's thinking about what are those things that really need, and then what's the best tools to meet those needs. If Microsoft Teams is a bandwidth hog and it slows down because the processes, it takes churns and it probably takes up a ton of memory and CPU usage when you're using it, then that's probably not the right tool for what you need to do. And again, to your point, if they need to have open conversations and then some closed conversations, that can all happen in Discourse.
Yeah, it doesn't happen well in Blackboard is my problem.
Yeah, I experienced Blackboard, but many, many, many years ago. And
it hasn't probably gotten much better. There's no like tagging feature, the quoting feature and the tagging feature and the groups feature in Discourse is like, it just allows you to really, and I think that, it will change how I do things in the way, like when I did use Blackboard for a course I took that was Intro to Online Teaching. And, he let us just go and have, he kind of said what he expected in the way of conversation, but our conversations did go beyond that. And then when it came time for like, a grade for conversations, he just said, give me 3 examples of your best, posts. Like he made us curate our own sort of posts and say, well, what is the best that demonstrates that I was actually doing what he kind of wanted us to do?
And that's what you do in the real world. I mean, when I do my performance review, I have to come up with examples.
Yeah.
But going back to the tagging and the quoting, that is a skill that we all need now. So we shifted to WebEx Teams 2 months ago. I've been on the pilot since last year. If I could only get people to use the quoting and the tagging and the threading feature, oh my. It really is, because we're shifting to things like Slack, Microsoft Teams, WebEx Teams, fill in the blank, where in order to make sense through the noise, you do need to tag people. You need to quote, because here's what I want to really go back to what you were saying here.
Mm-hmm.
So by using discourse and helping, people may go, well, I'm used to those skills. You need to think about how you're going to use those skills in the world of work. And that's what this provides. Just having an open conversation doesn't really teach you anything, but if they can build that skill of threading and tagging and quoting, that's something they could take wherever they go,
Mm-hmm.
because it does help you make sense of the noise. And that's really something we're trying to help people with. Every time I get into a conversation with somebody and they don't use the threading feature or they don't use the quoting, it's just a little, hey, you might want to try this, and here's why.
Yeah.
And once they see it, they're like, oh, that's powerful. I'm like, it is, because that way you can quickly scan. The search feature and hashtags is also really good in discourse. So I tend to, somebody asked me about it. So I've been putting a hashtag. It's a long one. I should make it shorter. But what it allows me to do in each one of my dailies, and any reply I post that I want to make sure I go back to, I can search all of discourse just for my hashtag, and it'll bring up all of them. I'm like, oh, there it is. Instead of me having to go back, where did I post that? What did I do? So that's also a really good feature, because search and hashtags on any enterprise social network are in need as well. So these are all skills that they can take and use somewhere else.
Yeah, but so it's interesting that you said the hashtag thing, because it's not like I think discourse is saying we do hashtags as much. Like if you actually put the hashtag thing, it will link you to categories. I don't know if you've noticed that it starts to fill in like the category names. So that's beyond, but so if I'm hearing you correctly, you're choosing certain posts and replies that you're putting
Yes.
it on so that
Yeah.
afterwards I can find those, because
exactly.
you can download all of your work, but you're pre-curating.
I'm pre-curating. And
it's
not on all of my replies.
No,
so there'll
I get
be
that.
certain things that I want to go back to, that maybe I made a reply to somebody. I'm like, ooh, I want to go back to that. So that way, using the hashtag and the search feature, quickly, instead of me seeing everything I do, these are the things that are really important to me.
Yeah, because they have bookmarks, but bookmarks, yeah, you can't really cluster them. That part I like
the search feature better. It's just,
yes.
And again, it's just how I work. But what discourse allows you to do is help people to play with things. And every enterprise social network is built on things like hashtags, tagging people, search features, threaded conversations. So these are skills, and they can say, well, what works for me? I'm a hashtag girl. So I like to search by a hashtag because, again, to your point, it is my curated list. Instead of it being everything, I'm like, these are the things that are important to me. And I will only use them in certain replies. I don't use them in all my replies. I'm like, ooh, I really like this idea. Instead of me exporting it to Evernote at that moment, I'm like, I just throw the hashtag in.
I love that.
So these are all skills that are transferable and things that are important in the world of work. And we have a lot of people, and this isn't any generation. We have a lot of people that just aren't used to this. So they may be used to social media, but they're not used to searching by a hashtag in the world of work. They're like, oh, I use this. I'm like, yeah, you use it on Twitter. Let's translate that over here to Workplace by Facebook. Yes. And how you can leverage that. So these are really good skills for them to have now and in the future, because there's just going to be more and more and more and more information, whether it's on an enterprise social network or on the internet, and they need to get really good at filtering and tagging and really just being able to cut through the noise.
Yeah, so that skill in and of itself has tremendous value. And if I hear what you're saying is also, if you haven't caught up with these things at this point, it's going to be even more important to catch up with what has already been developed, because we're probably moving into a place where there's going to be new developments, because we're going to find where the limits are in the current things that we have. Like it's not perfect yet, but it's going to be built upon. And that's even another opportunity for people that know this stuff well to be able to see the gap and create the solution to,
Yeah,
So
I
yeah.
think you're going to see much more asynchronous communication than you ever have in the past. Your really good discussion groups and really good online communities already do this. Work has not been really good at this. There
Mhm.
are pockets of it that are really good at it. But I think you're going to see much more movement. And that's where the tagging and all of that, it's, I can leave a message from my manager on Workplace by Facebook and tag her. I'm like, I really need you to see this. So that way it cuts through the noise of all the notifications and it's a priority notification. So these are skills that are important to have conversations with your team,
Mhm.
with your manager, and you're going to see much more of this, I think, in the future. I really
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I think I've heard the complaint about discourse that it doesn't do threading well. Um,
Yeah, I wish it did. I wish the threading was better on it. I
so
really, really do.
yeah, that
But
part I can see. Like, I don't feel like Blackboard does it better. And like I said, Blackboard is just, you actually have to go into every conversation. There's no search. I mean, there might be, but it's not, definitely not. Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. So I think this has given me a lot of things to think about. If you wanted to end on any other points that maybe I didn't ask you that you think would be helpful to a group of 35 students, or I have a second class that probably will be smaller, but just my management, it's an entry level. So it may be their first class in or their
Mm-hmm.
first semester, or if it's at a community college. So it is still the first 2 years of school. Anything else that you think is just
Um,
it doesn't have to be on this, just like other things that you're seeing that you think work on
yeah,
this, work on that.
I think what's really important is to keep your mind open to what management looks like, because it's not just, we get people that are so tied to, and I still have managers in our organization that are tied to when we get back to the office. Let go of the fact that we're location centric organizations and location centric managers. So everything that we teach now in our organization has both lenses on it. Again, how you lead virtually, it's just nuances. There are some very specific, but it's nuanced. And I think that's the important thing to keep in mind. As you learn about different things, just think about, well, what does this look like in a virtual environment? And how might I, if I'm talking about onboarding or I'm talking about feedback. I was just reading another article about feedback today, and I still hear of examples of people giving feedback on email. I'm like, no. Let's think about this. Would you give feedback by yelling through your office wall? Probably not. So let's get on a video chat. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a really good thing to keep in mind, because that's where the world of work is going. And even if you work in an office, you'll probably be working with somebody elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And these are skills that I would say the bulk of managers aren't really good at right now.
Yeah, I always stress that people think in my class, they're always like, I'm like, no, most managers did not really get any training.
Nope.
Like I make this class where this I could repackage, without the textbook, just the
Mm-hmm.
sort of topics that I feel are most important. I could package this as a management training,
Yeah.
and those managers would be better equipped for the actual job they're doing, but most actually
Mm-hmm.
just had good technical skill or sort of
Exactly.
know, and then
They
they
were
get
subject matter
promoted.
experts,
Exactly.
and
And
mm-hmm,
then there's this
they are
whole
moved
nother
up.
nuance, and it doesn't nobody, well, not nobody, but not all organizations
Agree.
really offer enough for that. So
Agree. And then you fold in remote work now, and after being in a location and I see you, therefore I know you're working, which isn't really true.
mm-hmm.
Now they don't see them, and trust issues are bubbling up and micromanagement is happening. So again, having that lens of what does this look like virtually is really important, because that is, again, where we're all moving to at some point in time.
Yeah, and being comfortable with the uncertainty, because like you
Yeah.
said, they don't know how to do this stuff, but someone on their team might actually be better. And that's where it's like sharing that leadership and being like, no, I recognize you as having a strength in this that I actually don't have. And that's when that's the part of it that it takes.
Use your resources.
Yeah.
And it's hard, you know, you get some leaders that are command and control,
Mm-hmm.
but to me, the best leaders are the ones that get their work done through their team, instead of command and here's what you're going to do. And I'm going to keep all the credit and I'm going to make sure I have all the last. That's where your team learns as well. It's that give and take, and that who has the strength to do this, and where's their passion.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that thought, because I think it's really the best way to get work with and out of people, is to really focus on their strengths and their passions.
Yeah. I know I did one close already, but maybe you have something to say on this since we have a few more minutes, because I think we had. Okay. So the thing I studied that, I had done, my undergrad was in human resources, but I didn't remember any of that actual coursework. And then my master's degree was in creativity, and that I remember so much of it. It wasn't as long ago. It is, I already had so much life experience so I could integrate it better. But when I talk about that, and I had this conversation with a student last semester where, that aspect of misunderstanding what that truly, the depth of that, and seeing it as just art and the arts type of things, right? So I guess, it would be interesting to hear, because I say, no, like it's so valuable of a skill, and what is, and it affects how you're doing pretty much everything. I mean, but so I guess because I really do, that comes up a lot for me, because I'll be like, but here's how you're developing creatively. And this is why developing creatively is important. And I think sometimes there's some of the students who don't value that as much. And so have one voice. So I guess maybe it might be interesting to hear your voice on that topic, just so that there's more voices speaking to that importance.
Yeah, I think just one really specific example of that, organizations more than ever need people who can look externally and bring an idea back, put a spin on it that is relevant to their organization. And that, to me, is just one really great example of creativity. Being able to see something that isn't quite the one-to-one, but it's like, ooh, that gives me a spark of an idea to help us solve this other problem. And that, if you can do that and bring that into your organization, wow, that is powerful. And it is hard to teach. It really is. But when you see it and you find it, and that to me is, seeing the disparate and bringing it together in a new and different way, that is creative leadership right there, and being able to share it.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I don't feel like it's as hard to teach, but that's because that's what I learned to do, because it's contextually, you have to learn it.
Yeah.
You have to see it happening. You have to be like, wow, like, so for me, that's partly the reason why also, like, I've experienced this summer, the power of discourse in my own development of the work I was doing all summer. And now, and the connections that I'm making through just people being able to read what I'm saying and reading what they're saying, like we're doing right here. Just to be clear, like we met in discourse like a week or two ago, like, and so to bring that into my college is, I am crafting my job as well. Like I'm going to do what I think is going to, my students have paid money to be here. They're going to, they want to this to prepare them for their future and work. I believe this is the best thing I can offer them. And I also know that if, I'm not going to say if it works, because together we can make that work.
Exactly.
And this is an open source software, which is a whole nother kind of topic that not, every organization's thinking about, is why would I want to use open source stuff, or why would I want to create open source? But that's a conversation to have. Yeah. And they basically are, I'm doing it, I'm modeling it.
Yes.
And I'm including them in it, so they get immersed in it and they feel the difference. And then they're like, oh wait, and they notice
the context.
Yep.
Yes.
And they notice
100%
where they're
agree.
doing it in other parts of their life
Yep.
then, and then they do more of it because
Yep.
it's awakened.
And that's how you help people to start to discover that they have that little spark, and they have that, and they've probably done it and just not realized it.
Yes, exactly.
And that's the piece. And it is a skill that you can use time and time and time and time and time again. It can be used in briefs and presentations, and it really can. It is, to me, probably emotional intelligence and creativity are the two biggest skills that people really should have and will need more of in the future.
Absolutely. Can't say more than that. So we'll end on that subject. All
There you
right.
go.
Bye.
Mic drop.
Thank you. Mic drop. Thank you so much.
No problem. Bye.